fixes. The road you're on, John Anderton, is the one less traveled. Make sure you
John Anderton. Century 21 stands provides gourmet cuisine. John Anderton. You could use a Guinness right about now. Stressed out, John Anderton.
escape from it all, Harrison. Get away, John Anderton. Forget your troubles.
Hello, Mr. Yakamoto. Welcome back to the Gap. How those assorted tank tops work out for you?
Nearly 20 years ago, we wrote the script for Minority Report. How many of you actually saw the film? Yeah, a lot of you. What is interesting to me is that the world has finally caught up to Minority Report. You may have noticed in that video clip that when Tom Cruise was walking through the mall, the Amex ad came up and said, member since 2037. When we wrote the script for Minority Report, we said it in 2050. Well, we were wrong. It's 2020 with that film. Everything that we put on screen in Minority Report, we can now do. So essentially, this talk is about what lies beyond Minority Report, because I've begun to think about what comes next. 20 years ago, Spielberg asked me and a team to create that world of Minority Report. And our goal was that a decade from when we wrote the script, people should say, that's just like in Minority Report. And I think we succeeded in that. So today, the world that we look around us resembles it in many ways. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to go down to the Standard Market down on Townsend. But at the Standard Market, you walk into the market, and facial recognition recognizes who you are, recognizes what you've taken off the shelf or put back, what you're walking out with, and completes the transaction with zero friction of any sort. The experience is friction-free, and is very much like the world we showed in Minority Report. Instead of retinal scans, it's facial scans that are producing the identity. So that's what the theme is today, is what lies beyond Minority Report. And I want to say thank you to you all for being here, hanging in to the end of the afternoon on Thursday afternoon, and turning up at 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. So thank you for being here. The central theme here is the notion that technology will enlighten our world. And what we mean by that is that everywhere we go, just as Tom encountered in that scene, the technology will enable the world around us to know who we are, configure its services around our needs and desires, and be a world that is, in fact, enlightening every step that we take. So that's the central theme. This is not a presentation about Salesforce, so I have to put up this a disclaimer. Nothing I'm going to talk about today should you even think about buying, because it doesn't even really exist. So this is about the future. This is not a sales presentation. I will barely talk about Salesforce anywhere during this presentation. Okay. So you've seen this many times. I put it up here because it is the context for virtually everything we're doing. The steam revolution, the electricity revolution, the computing revolution, and the intelligence revolution. And this really is about intelligence. We are going through a revolutionary time, and it's very fast. Now, there's a lot of mythology around about AI, and I want to dispel that mythology, because the truth is that most of it is, in fact, fantasy. It's bad science fiction. I started my career at a place called Stanford Research Institute back in roughly 1972. This is the history of the IT industry, and it is my personal history as well. My first computer was an IBM System 360, about the size of this room. I am the oldest employee in Salesforce. I'm 72. I just turned 72 about a month ago, and I love the irony that the oldest guy's in charge of the future. All right? Well, I have the shortest future in front of me. I take it really seriously. Every day matters. You know, all these 25-year-olds, they don't care. I care. But what is interesting at SRI in 1972 is we had 4 laboratories that were helping to build the future, among many others. My job was to look across it all and see where technology was going to take us. So first we had the ARPANET lab. And the ARPANET lab was the number 2 node of the ARPANET. And the ARPANET, for those of you who don't know, was the predecessor of the Internet. The ARPANET evolved into the Internet. And so I was one of the first 1,000 people online. I've been online since 1972. There's about 300 of us left alive who can say that, but I'm one of them. We also had the Human Augmentation Lab, where Doug Engelbart invented the mouse, the interactive computer screen. And both of these transformed the world. But we also had an AI lab and a robotics lab. And what was interesting is the AI lab was started in 1969, a little bit before I got there. And the founder of the lab said, well, look, it looks to me like it'll take us about 5 years to build a general intelligence. So somewhere around 1975, we should have generally intelligent computers. Well, about 1975 is when we shut down the lab and the robotics lab, because both were premature. And our vision of what the world would be like when all this technology came to fruition was wrong. That is, the technology was not ready. But what has changed is that we are now in the world that we actually imagined almost 50 years ago as that technology was begun. Because what has happened since then is gradually the pace of change has increased. It took us about almost 40 years to absorb the mainframe, about 20 years to absorb the PC, about another decade to absorb the smartphone, but it's less than 5 years in which AI is coming along. So the pace of change has accelerated in a rather dramatic way. So today we can begin to think about the things that we did not imagine almost 50 years ago. And the thing that we got wrong was that, in fact, the model of artificial intelligence that we were pursuing was fatally flawed. That is, that the way we thought about it in that time was to build from the top down, understand the brain, take that understanding of the brain, turn it into equations, to put those equations into a computer, and it'll behave like a brain. That was the theory. But the problem was, step one is understand the brain. And that turned out to be much more difficult than we ever anticipated. In fact, today we have a 30-year research program here in the United States on the brain, the first 10 years of which are mapping a mouse brain. Right? So we might have a mouse brain in about a decade. DARPA is working on mapping a cubic millimeter of the brain. It has 5 teams of 10 people working 5 years with $10 billion to try and map a cubic millimeter. Think about it. That's the size of a pinhead, right? And we want to try and get everything that happens in that little cubic millimeter and understand it. And it's going to take that kind of an effort. So it is a very long way from that world where we will actually have a general purpose intelligence. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not coming through that door anytime soon as the Terminator. We're not going to have runaway AIs, runaway robots, any of that stuff. That's all bad science fiction. I know I write the good stuff. And besides Minority Report, I helped write a few other films like War Games, Deep Impact, and Sneakers, and all of them were reasonably scientifically sound. Terminator, which is a terrific film, I love it, not scientifically sound. Not going to happen anytime soon. So you do not need to worry about runaway AIs. When we talk about artificial intelligence today, we're talking about something much simpler, much more banal, a narrower sense of artificial intelligence. It's basically machine intelligence, machine learning built around big sets of data that get smarter and smarter and more capable with more data. And it's really very limited in its capabilities. It's taking the friction out of everyday life, carrying out really routine tasks in a very limited way. So, take language translation, for example. How many of you have used Google Translate? Right? It's actually pretty good. But what's going on when Google translates? Say you want to take the German word house, H-A-U-S, and translate it into the Spanish word casa, C-A-S-A. That's all the computer knows is one string of 4 letters equals another string of 4 letters. Knows nothing about mortgages, kids playing on the lawn, or the neighbors, has no context, no purpose. It just carries out a very limited cognitive task. And that language translation program will not do facial recognition, will not recommend books, will not drive your car. It will do one thing and do it reasonably well. And that is the case of all of these capabilities. That is, that they are uniquely tuned, highly capable for a limited purpose. They will be embedded everywhere in all kinds of devices that will come alive as they express that intelligence. But that's all that they will do. You can add them all up, and they don't add up to a general intelligence. This is not a route to general intelligence. It is a route to essentially more and more useful cognitive capabilities. Okay, so here's a couple of examples. I don't know how many of you use Netflix, but how many of you are Netflix users? Right, almost everybody. So when you look at Netflix the next time, pay attention to what they're showing you on the screen, what the interface looks like, what the images look like, and then watch the next one and watch the next one after that. Because what's actually going on is Netflix is testing you and training you. They're trying to figure out which style of interface gets you to click on that movie. They're also trying to broaden your tastes in movies. You won't be surprised I like sci-fi films, so not surprisingly, at some point it's going to run out. They want to broaden my taste. So they're going to give me various things to test out. Will he go for a detective film? Will he go for a romantic comedy? Will he go for a Western? And so on. And then start building on that, even if I've never chosen a Western in the past, because they want to keep me as a customer, keep me clicking on their website. So what we're seeing is these tools are being used to understand me, understand my tastes, and even maybe change those tastes. So it's an example of the kind of thing that's already underway. Clara, an appointment, a scheduling tool. You know, I don't know what it's like for you, but, you know, trying to find a room here, connect 3 or 4 different people on Thursday or Friday to meet, a real pain in the butt, right? You have to make a lot of phone calls or emails back and forth, changing times, getting it right. Well, Clara takes care of this routine, simple task that is a real high source of friction. Takes all the friction out of it. Let's go back to that one for a moment, because that's important. Using intelligence in healthcare. So, for example, Bainbridge Health tackles a really important problem, but a trivial one: avoiding mistaking drugs in a hospital. Lots of people die every year because they take the wrong dose or the wrong drugs. When I was a child, an intern gave me an overdose of a drug by mistake when I had a toothache. Nearly killed me, right? Well, Bainbridge's job is to make sure that the drug dose, the right drug gets to the right person at the right time in the right place, and make sure that those kinds of errors do not occur. Very simple task, almost bureaucratic in character, does not require great intelligence, but it requires very precise paying attention to the details of a situation and avoiding an error. There are many such examples that we're seeing in the realm of artificial intelligence of the sort we're talking about now. Now, I just want to ask a question. This shows 28 minutes up there. Is that right? Is this a half an hour or an hour? 40, okay, because this is only showing 28. That's why. All right, thank you. So let's take a look at what the future actually will be like. Well, first of all, every customer is going to be connected, right? You can assume that people are going to be carrying a device like this. Is there anybody in this room who does not have one of these? Right? Could you live without it today? And of course, a decade ago, it didn't even exist, right? In fact, when Steve Jobs was introducing this, he didn't even know what to call it. He said it's a phone. Let's see, it's an iPod. It's some kind of internet connection device. Apps didn't even exist yet when he introduced this device. Let's be clear. So this whole ecosystem of hundreds of thousands of apps and the ubiquity and centrality of this device is less than a decade old. So you start thinking, everything is going to be connected. Everything is going to be able to offer intelligent services. So we're going to encounter the world in new ways. Augmented reality, virtual reality, bioprocessors of various sorts. Fitbit just announced it's going into the health business. Apple just introduced its new fourth generation watch with healthcare applications. That augmented reality on your left, that's the Magic Leap glasses. Not quite there yet. Very expensive. VR, not quite there, still not working all that well. So I was a bit more optimistic in the past. It's coming along still pretty slowly. So we've got some ways to go before AR and VR are really important. Google Pixel Buds. I love this. I don't know if any of you tried these. Basically, this is the earbud that translates for you. If you're a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Babelfish is real. It's now finally arrived. Hear the hands laughing out there. The truth is, we can now walk down the street in Tokyo and understand Japanese if you don't, or down the Bund in Shanghai and understand Chinese, and so on. I really want this technology, and it is just here now. Or we're also now in a world of something really radically new. This is a company, a new startup you will never have heard of, called Koniku. And I've just visited them a couple of weeks ago. This is the first neural chip. Basically, inside that case is a bunch of neurons that are now connected electronically outside. And electronics can read the state of those neurons. And this particular set of neurons was designed to detect by smell, because we can smell pretty well. At the end of the olfactory nerve are neurons that are designed to actually interpret a smell. And in this case, the smell that these neurons were tuned for was C4 explosive. So in fact, think about the security system of the future at the airport. You don't go through a metal detector. You don't go through the normal security. You walk down the hallway, and the sensor detects if you're carrying a weapon. That is not the distant future. That's already being tested. But think about food safety. Think about food transportation and all the fragrances that kind of come off that, for good or ill. Being able to tell what's spoiled meat or spoiled milk or spoiled dairy products and so on. So there are many, many applications of that just around odor, right? But this is just the beginning of the integration of electronics and biology. We're all on our way to being cyborgs, and this is the first step in that direction. This is neural control, the ability to think and have things actually happen. So this is a sensor that detects what you're thinking and puts it on a screen before you even speak it, right? So this comes out of the MIT Media Lab. Hugh Herr at the Media Lab is a scientist who lost the lower half of both of his legs when he was a teenager. He now builds the most advanced prosthetics funded by the US government because of all the soldiers that who've lost limbs during the war. Having said that, what he has are very cool prosthetics. He has chrome legs for dancing, big bright orange legs for climbing like a spider. He has extensor legs. And what he likes to say is the upper half of his body is deteriorating at the same rate as the rest of us, and the lower half is improving on a 3-month innovation cycle. So I've got an artificial hip, 2 artificial eyes. I'm going to upload iOS 12 soon. But you can see what's coming in that integration of biology and electronics. And you may remember in Minority Report, how did Tom Cruise control computers? With gesture. Well, this is Minority Report. This is the new product from Google called Soli, and it is basically gesture control in free space. So even that has now come about. We're in that world. So we live in the world of Minority Report. So we think that the next platform, and this is what I think is actually the next step in terms of the world beyond Minority Report. That is that everyone is going to have a digital assistant. We are in the first stage of this. How many of you have an Alexa, a Google Home, or an Amazon Home device? Yeah, if you don't have one, get one. And start experimenting with one. One of the devices, doesn't really matter which one. They vary in quality and so on. But this is the beginning of something big. We are today with this new digital assistant where we were, say, with PCs in 1985, right? The first Mac was just coming along, the first HP and the IBM PC, very crude devices still compared to where we were. Think about the BlackBerry versus the iPhone. We're sort of in the BlackBerry era of smart digital assistants. You can kind of see what it should be. It's not quite there yet, right? When the iPhone came along, it got there. We knew what it was. So that's where we are today. We're in the early stage of what is actually going to be a revolution. Everyone will have a digital assistant. How many of you actually have a personal assistant? Anybody? Yeah, about half a dozen of you. Right. The rest of you have to work. Say, well, look, sitting over there is my assistant, Amanda Jurinen. Now, Amanda got me here in time. She made sure my computer was ready. She had water on the stage for me. She knows what I'm doing next. I don't have to think about it. In fact, there's a lot of things I don't have to think about because of Amanda. I don't do my expenses. I don't do my scheduling. I don't organize my airline. I make sure that all the people are in the right place at the right time. I don't do any of that. Amanda does that for me. And why? Because I'm a senior executive at a large corporation. I get that. So senior executives, rock stars, all have that help. Now, everyone will have it. And what's the justification? The justification is productivity, right? The theory is my time is valuable enough that it justifies having someone support that time. But everyone's time matters. Everyone is valuable. If we're all going to be much more productive, this is how it will happen. That is that a lot of tasks are going to be taken care of in the background, friction-free, so you don't have to think about it. So you use your neural cycles for much more important tasks, learning, and so on. This is what human beings are meant to do, not filing expense reports. But today, what we're already seeing is a variety of beginnings of the digital assistants, whether it's Amazon or Google or Facebook or Microsoft. All of these guys are beginning to develop their own. So they're kind of in the early stage, and we don't know which ones are going to win. And some of them will win, some of them will begin to disappear. But it's just beginning to move in that direction. Now, to make this work, we've looked at a variety of technologies, and we've tried to assess which ones were very important. And I think there's a familiar list, whether it's 5G, artificial intelligence and machine learning, robotics, all of these things. We've gone through each of them and tried to look at which ones are likely to be important over the next 5 years for the kind of things that we do here at Salesforce. And what we reached the conclusion is that there's about a half a dozen of them that are particularly important. And now the pattern of change, some continually develop gradually, others develop slowly and then accelerate, like AI, like voice, like bots, and so on. So we think AI, bots, voice, infrastructure, cybersecurity, and Internet of Things, all going to be high impact in the next few years. A bit more of a wild card is blockchain, edge computing, and VR and AR. Now, blockchain was the controversial one. How many of you think blockchain is important? How many of you think it's overhyped? Yeah, it's about 50-50. I'm on the slightly overhyped side. However, my colleagues disagreed with me. When we were doing the work on the future of the digital assistant, I went in thinking, this is not going to be important. But nearly every one of my colleagues said, you're wrong. So in fact, we are working on blockchain. We've got a couple of applications we're working on. So we've moved it up from the wild cards to the high impact. Quantum computing is going to be important someday, but not quite yet. 5G is going to take a while to roll out, and so on. And robotics, will get gradually important, but it's going to take longer than people think. So this is how we think about the fundamental technologies that are going to go into the digital assistant. So when you start putting it all together, you take the key technologies, and you can see we've added blockchain. You look at the big four producers like Amazon, Google, etc. You look at other disruptors like China, and I'll come back to that, the regulatory issues associated with it, the desire for personalization, the need for trust, and you put it all together, and what we're going to create is a new set of customer experiences built around learning assistants and conversational UIs. And you can begin to see how it will take shape. So let's take a look at what a day in the life in this interconnected world will be like. So you can imagine that moment in the morning when Alexa wakes me up. Peter, time to get up. Get up. And of course, Alexa, who's learned a great deal about me, already knows what I want to know first thing. I want to know, how's my kid? He just moved from Boston to Copenhagen. Has he emailed me? Has he posted anything on Facebook or Twitter or any of the other social media overnight? First thing a parent wants to know is, how's his kid? Even if he's 28 years old. Then, what's the weather? Because I need to know how to dress. I also want to know what my first appointment is, so I also need to dress. I want to know what the president's latest tweets are. All the things you need to know when the day begins, right? So now I'm ready to head off to my first appointment, and my self-driving car turns up, and of course, Alexa's driving the car. She's in there with me. She knows where I'm going. She's interacting with the car. And of course, I want to change the slides for that first presentation with my colleagues on our way to the meeting. So I say, Alexa, turn the window into a screen. We want to actually do some development of our slides. Bring me the slides from my deck last week that I used in that meeting we had in Munich. And I want to integrate those with the deck we've got on screen right now. And Alexa will do all of that, enabling us to use that time and function highly productively. All right, on the way back to the office, I want to stop and do a little bit of shopping, right? Pick up a few things for that evening, and I arrive at the store, and of course, I just walk into the store, and it recognizes who I am, and I buy what I want, take things off the shelf, and walk out the door, just like at Standard Market down the street, and it has all happened. Now it's facial recognition rather than retinal scans, but in fact what we're seeing is that world, again, like Minority Report, at the mall, the world knows me as I go through that transaction. This is not the distant future. This has already begun to happen. I get to the office, and of course there, Alexa's in the walls. And Alexa knows what my prospects are, helps me organize my calendar for the day. I say, Alexa, organize my prospects by the 3 CEOs I have not seen in the last 6 months, and organize a trip to Munich again, because I got to go back, but get me the same hotel, but a different driver next week. And Alexa does all that, just like a human assistant would. So all those capabilities that today reside only in human beings at the most senior level actually will now be ubiquitously available for everyone, making us all much more productive and all taking the friction out of life so we don't have to think about it. And you want to keep thinking about that phrase, we don't have to think about it. All right. Now, for this to work, however, requires lots and lots of data. So one of the big developments that's happening now is the beginning of what we call the personal data economy. Data is the new oil, right? Amazon is the Saudi Arabia of data, is the way you want to think about it. Because essentially, we're using all that data to create an enormous amount of value, but the customer's not getting the value. The individual's not getting the value that is the source of the data. I generate tons of data, but other people get all the value out of that data. Unfair, But that's about to change. Because here's what's actually happening today, right? I carry out a lot of activities. I go to the bank, I go to see the doctor, I go shopping, I want to go renew my driver's license, all of those things. I leave a digital dust everywhere that's captured and made sense of for other people, not for me. Well, that's about to change. What we're now going to see are data brokers who do three things. First of all, they make sense of the data. That is, a lot of the data that is being generated is not particularly useful. This makes it more useful, the data broker. Second thing is it protects my identity, does not share my identity when it shares my data. And third, it provides value to me for the data that it is selling to other people. So a good example was MoviePass, right? With MoviePass, you sign up for $15 a month, you can go to a movie every single day. And what it means is that Sony Pictures and Universal doesn't know who went to the theater, only MoviePass does. Now, MoviePass gathers that data and sells it to Universal and Sony. And my benefit is I get cheap theater tickets, and my data is protected. We're going to see more and more models like that beginning to develop, where consumers get a benefit for the data that they create. And their personal digital assistant will determine who gets access to that data, on what terms. Because part of the function of that digital assistant is to protect me from harm, and is to assure that the data that I generate gets me value, and my identity is protected in the course of that. So we've seen a lot of examples. AMC found it so challenging, they've come up with their own product for AMC theaters that competes with MoviePass. Controlio is another example. Controlio is a company in the UK that is in the business of personal RFPs. Basically, if you sign up with Controlio, and let's say you have auto insurance, and your auto insurance comes up for renewal, Controlio will send you an email and say, would you like to consider other providers? And if you say yes, they go out on the web and send a message to the insurance industry and say, look, I've got a customer of the following characteristics, drives the following car, certain age, and they would like insurance. Make them a bid. They take all those bids, they sift them down to the 3 best ones and send you those, and you get to choose. So what's happened here is you get better choices, better options, your data is protected in that search, and Controlio now has your data as well and can resell it, but without your own identity. So now we're in a world where you actually have a whole intermediary set around data access. However, at the center of this is one fundamental dilemma, the dilemma between personalization and trust. We all like the fact that things are highly personalized. I assume most of you saw the demo during the keynote that Tony Prophet did of going to the Marriott. I mean, I love the idea of turning up with my key on my phone, the door knowing who I am when I walk in, the temperature being all set. Alexa says, hey, I set it for the Grateful Dead. I said, you can listen to the Dead all night if you like. We've got the espresso on the way. All of that stuff I really love. But for that to function well, I have to have high trust. And so the challenge for Marriott is to do both. How do you personalize on the one hand, and how do you assure trust on the other? Because no trust, no personalization. These things, it's not an either or, it's a both and. And unless you can do both, you will not be able to deliver personalized services to your customers. So this becomes a really critical challenge, is how do you do both at the same time? Assure high levels of trust while delivering high levels of personalization. Now, behind this is this big fear of digital disruption. You know, when Mark and I used to go visit customers a few years ago, what we used to hear from CEOs is, I don't want to be Ubered, which meant having your business model blown up by an organization like Uber. Now we hear something different. Amazon's coming into my market and I don't know what to do. And Amazon's coming into everybody's market. Doesn't matter what it is. They're coming at you. And that really is a big deal because they are the Saudi Arabia of data. And in the 1960s and 70s, if you were in the computer industry, you didn't compete with IBM. IBM was the environment, not the competition. You lived in the world that IBM created, right? There were a couple guys who tried to compete with IBM. They didn't survive. Remember DEC? Remember Burroughs? Remember Sperry? All gone. Right? IBM survived. They were the environment. Amazon is the environment, not the competitor. We are going to be living in the world that Amazon is creating. And they are operating in the background, transforming the world in many, many ways. And you look at these numbers, and it really says a lot. You may remember about 2 weeks ago, Amazon hit $1 trillion market cap. Second company after Apple to do that. The market cap of all of those retailers on your left us about the future, right? There's profoundly skeptical about everything on your left, and Amazon on the right. And the truth is, Amazon is delivering trust. They're highly trustworthy. People trust Amazon, and they're hyper efficient, and they give you great choice. So they're a ferocious competitor in this world, and we take them very seriously. And you think about the world of brands and Amazon. I was just at Procter & Gamble a couple of weeks ago, and it was quite remarkable because, of course, Procter & Gamble is a brand company. They live on brands. They built their company on Tide, on various soap and cleaning products and makeup, etc. And if you don't care what kind of laundry soap you have or what kind of surface cleaner you need for your kitchen counter, then what happens is when you say, Alexa, get me some laundry detergent and bring it to me every 6 weeks, what you will get is a nice white box with a smile on it from Amazon of commodity detergent. If you order cleaning products, that will happen. If you order batteries, you'll get Amazon batteries. You will not get Duracell or Everready. And in fact, that digital assistant is between you and your customer, between the retail environment where essentially they want to deliver their products first. And there's nothing wrong with that, but now the real challenge is how do you get through the digital assistant to the ultimate customer? How do you get your brand recognized by the customer? This is going to be one of the big challenges for brand-oriented companies who live by brand, is penetrating the wall created by that digital assistant. So you think about who's going to be powerful here. Well, it's Google, it's Amazon, it's Apple. These are the companies that are really, really going to be powerful. Why? Because they have the data. This is a world that rewards high levels of data. But this is limited to the US. Because, of course, there are a few other players in China. Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu. And they're moving even faster because they've got more data and more freedom to use that data. I don't know how many of you saw Kai-Fu Lee's panel yesterday, but it was terrific. And I highly recommend his book, AI Superpower, because it is really all about this. We have moved from the world of research to the world of implementation. In the world of research, the US had a big advantage. In the world of implementation, China has a big advantage. More data and more freedom to use that data. So that becomes a big opportunity. So we're going to see an interesting competition play out now over the next few years. But the world of the big competition is already set. It is Amazon, Google, Apple versus Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. And that is the competition that we're going to see in the world of digital assistants. However, earlier I said runaway AIs and robots are not an issue, but this is an issue. The access and control of data and the values that lie behind the data sets that we use. You can have biased data. You can have algorithms that do not do what we want or do things inappropriately based on those biases. Now, when we were doing just recommendation engines for books, it didn't really much matter. But if you're using it, for example, to establish prison sentences, and you give this guy life, and you let this guy out in 6 months because the recommendation engine said he's a risk and he's not, he should have the right to see what, in fact, that algorithm was based on. Or a drug trial, right? He gets the drug, but he does not. He's going to die. Shouldn't he have the right to see the algorithm that is going to kill him? He gets a mortgage. He doesn't. Shouldn't he get the right to say, why am I not going to be able to buy a house? So there's a real issue here as more and more important decisions get made by AIs or recommendations by it. So we're going to have to deal with AI bias in data sets, and we're going to have to deal with essentially the necessary issues of algorithmic transparency. This we take very seriously at Salesforce. That's why we've established the ethical and humane use office, because we think we have to pay attention. This is a central issue for us and for our industry. If we don't, we're going to be stopped from doing the things we want to do. So you start putting all this together and you ask yourself, so what does this all mean for work in the future, right? Because everybody's worried that the AIs and the robots are going to eliminate all the jobs, right? Your kids aren't going to have any jobs. You're all soon going to be out of jobs. That's what's going to happen? Not true. Let me show you the actual reality. This is the history of employment in the United States, so you could draw a virtually similar graph for England, for Europe, for Germany, for France, for Japan. In 1950, we had a population of 160 million people. Of that 160 million people, of the working age population, roughly 25 to 65, 55% were employed, or 55 million people altogether. Now we fast forward to 2015, and it's 330 million people, of which 60% of the working age population were employed, or 153 million people. We created 100 million jobs from 1950 to 2015. But we destroyed a lot of jobs on the way. But do we really care? For example, in 1950, if you worked in a bank or an insurance company, there was a big back room full of women at typing tables, typing bank statements or insurance claims. There were no computers to do all that. That was a woman's job. They were typists, right? That all went away. Are we unhappy about that? Obviously, not at all. You think of what's happened in between. When we created containerization, essentially, we're going to eliminate all the jobs at the port. That didn't happen. ATMs didn't eliminate the bank tellers. Spreadsheets didn't eliminate the accountants. And God knows the legal research software didn't eliminate the lawyers. We got plenty of those. And you think about in 1950, travel. In travel, very few people traveled. It was the wealthy and a relatively few businesses. And then you fast forward to today, and what you've seen is a huge explosion of the travel industry. Airlines, rental cars, hotels, theme parks, etc. Millions of people working in travel. I can absolutely tell you with certainty that no one in 1950 imagined that in 1975 they would go to work at Disney World Paris dressed as Mickey Mouse. Right? That would actually be a job. But it is. Every day today, somebody gets dressed up and goes to Disney World dressed as Mickey Mouse every single day. Now, it takes imagination to see the future. You think about the fact in 1950, almost no one worked in television. 3 channels of television. Television employed a few thousand people. Today, you see the hundreds of channels of TV, millions of movies being produced worldwide. It involves tens of thousands of people, millions of people worldwide producing television and film for entertainment. So you have to think about what's possible out there. Yes, we're going to eliminate many jobs, but we're going to create many more jobs than we eliminate. I'm going to skip this in the interest of time, but let's take an example. So there are a number of things that are going to happen. We're all going to need IoT consultants at home to organize our home electronic systems because we're going to have smart homes. We're going to need life assistants to deal with complexity. For example, I'm about to retire in the next couple of years. I'm 72. I went to meet with my financial advisor recently to structure my portfolio for retirement. Now, you have to know I'm a rocket scientist. I actually am an astronautical engineer. I worked at Apollo. I understand all that kind of stuff. I was hopelessly confused by the end of about an hour and a half with my advisor at Morgan Stanley. I need help. So I need an assistant to help cope with all of that. But the one I really like is the truck driver, right? We're going to eliminate all the truck drivers, right? They're all going to go driven. We're going to replace them with self-driving trucks. Wrong. That is not what's going to happen. First of all, we're going to need more truck driving because of the home delivery model. Now we're restructuring the whole distribution system. In front of my house, at least 5 trucks an hour go by, delivery trucks. Half of them stop at my house. My wife's a professional retail researcher. So we're going to need more truck driving. But the truck driver of the future is a very different guy, a very different person. Today, outside of Las Vegas, there is a building owned by the U.S. Air Force where pilots go to work every morning, but they don't get in the cockpit of a plane. They sit in front of a computer screen, and they fly a drone halfway around the world over Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq. And then they go home to their families at night, to their husband or their wife. They hang out with their kids, and they don't destroy their families by being away all the time. That's the truck driver of tomorrow. Because also in Las Vegas is a company called Starsky Robotics that is building the following kind of truck. The truck driver of tomorrow does not go get in the cab of a truck. He either puts on a virtual reality helmet or sits in front of a screen and picks up the first truck he's going to drive that day, drives it through the city streets. Because you can't do self-driving in the middle of, say, San Francisco. Imagine trying to drive a truck around Dreamforce today. Right? You think a self-driving truck could do that? Obviously not. It has to adapt real time to a really messy situation. So I pick up my first truck, get it out on the freeway, get it out here on Highway 101, and I send it to LA. I pick up my second truck, drive it up through the city streets, put it on the freeway, send it off to Sacramento. Pick up my third truck, get it on the freeway, send it off to Portland, and so on, till I've got 5 trucks on the freeway. First one is now arriving. Pick up the first one, drive it through the city streets of LA, and deliver it to its local site. I'm now driving 5 trucks instead of 1. And in fact, Starsky thinks it could be 10 trucks. I'm a little skeptical about that. And these truck drivers don't die in accidents, don't suck fumes all day, and then get to know their husband or wife and their kids. They're not on the road all the day. So we're going to need more of these guys, but with a very different set of capabilities. And the skill set is Grand Theft Auto. So this is a very different kind of truck driver than today. The real issue we have is the 55-year-old truck driver who does not wish to change, who wants to continue the life that they have? Are they going to be able to adapt and change to that new world? So the real issue behind this is learning. And that's really where I want to wrap up, is what it's going to take. We have to learn, unlearn, and relearn. As I said, I'm the oldest guy in Salesforce. I started at 65. I had to learn a whole new industry at 65. We're all going to have to keep doing that, learning and relearning as we go forward into the future. Fortunately, we've learned a lot more about learning. So these are all educational technology startups in which lots of people are investing literally billions of dollars based on new neural models, new learning models, new ways of being, and so on. And all of these are about learning in the midst of life, continuing to improve our skills. That's just something we're all going to have to do. That's what Trailhead is about for us, improving the learning skills of people inside Salesforce and in our customers and in the society around us. Because we think we have a responsibility to help assure that that learning process actually helps us adapt to this world of technology. So that's what we've, this is the slide about Trailhead, but that's why we've opened it up to our customers and so on, because we see this as central to our responsibility of taking care of assuring that there are good tools for learning to be able to adapt. So I just want to end with one quote. And the quote is from Time magazine. It has nothing to do with the fact that Mark bought Time. The automation jobless, the number of jobs lost to more efficient machines is only part of the problem. Automation may prevent the economy from creating enough new jobs. Automation is beginning to move in and eliminate service and office jobs too. So you all have to be worried. You're right. All your jobs are vulnerable, right? Except for one thing. That's when it was published. We've been here before. And by the way, I love the irony that that's the cover of Time magazine from when this quote came. We're back in the same place again with the Russians. Having said that, the important point is we've been here before. We were there in the 19th century. We were there in the beginning of the 20th century. We were there in the middle of the 20th century with computerization, and that fear is still today, and it has never been realized. Yes, jobs are lost, but we keep creating many more jobs than we ever destroy. So you think about your kids. Your kids are going to have a vastly better life than you are. It's going to be very different, the choices that are open to them, but they're going to have tools and capabilities that we can barely imagine today. So that's why I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. Thank you for being here today. So I'm happy to take a few questions. I think we have about 10 or 15 minutes for questions. If you wouldn't mind using the mic, I'd appreciate it. You also can challenge what I've said. You don't have to make it a question.
Thank you, sir.
There you go.
Hello.
Yep.
You're as funny as inspirational, so thank you very much. I have two questions. I'm not too greedy. But first is there any structure in thinking about the future, or do you just throw darts? And second is, does it not frustrate you day and night that you're always living in the future and you're never happy with the present?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I'm actually pretty, yes, I've been living in the future since 1972, when I started this kind of professional work. So I have been living in the future a long time, but unfortunately I'm sort of bipolar in that respect. I can live in tomorrow and today, and I do enjoy today. But the truth is I actually do have a methodology. It isn't just throwing darts. I was head of scenario planning for Shell in the 1980s, and we used scenario planning as a tool for trying to think about the future of oil and gas, of energy, et cetera, of geopolitics. That's what I did for the next 30 years. I had my own consulting company doing that. I've written books on the subject. You can read the book that's called The Art of the Long View, that is all about scenario planning, and it's used by basically most companies in the world. It is also taught in virtually every business school, so it's a little more than throwing darts.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Other questions? Well, if you have no more questions, thank you for being here.